Hey, morning everyone. Change of plans on my off to a good start. Anyway, today we're going to be taking a look at some mobile software development. So, last few streams I've been kind of taking a look at some new stuff. I always think it's good just to take a little bit of time and just kind of get in there to technologies and stuff like that. But today, I figured what we would do is take a look at stuff that I guess are more things that I spend most of the day in and out either doing development for or helping what my company. And I've had quite a few people ask me since I've been streaming here to, hey, can you take a stab at like creating a new project? How do you architect some things? How do you set some stuff up out there? Things like that. So it's kind of what we're going to do today. So we're going to create kind of the framework for a mobile application. I'll explain the app here in just a minute. Create the framework for it. I'm going to pull in some proprietary libraries when I do it, at least one of them, and I'll explain that. But realistically, nothing that you couldn't end up doing yourself with just off the off the shelf open source projects. Again, I'll explain that in a few moments here, but you'll see that. But we're going to be using Xamarin.Forms, ReactiveUI. I've got our Aurora Controls out there. We'll be pulling those in. Kind of doing some UI setup and some control glue up and stuff like that. So should be a good couple hours here. I've got till about 11:30. Maybe I could push it a little bit more here. But we'll probably stream until about then. Let me check the chat. Hey, Sean. Hey, thanks for joining, man. Taking time out to here on the weekend. Hey, Omero. How's it going, man? Right. So like I said, so we're going to take a look at building a new project out here. And the project that I want to build might be a little weird. So I'll explain it. So for Christmas, I got my wife this thing, the Ring Fit Adventure. Staying in shape, in continuing with the workout thing's pretty tough. I'm sure everybody here probably has had some kind of New Year's resolution or something like that. And I thought this would be a cool thing for my wife and I to do so that we could do it sort of together, right? And so typically we've got a row machine at the house, so I row quite a bit. Try to eat healthy, stay healthy, but something like this I thought was pretty good. And essentially what it is like see it here, it's like thing for the Nintendo Switch. It's a ring thing. I think it comes from like the bodies. I really don't know. But then it's got like basically you're playing like old Final Fantasy with it. So you get set up, you can kind of see there's these little monsters out here or whatever. And you use the ring to fight them off, right? So if you've ever played like an old Final Fantasy, I mean like maybe through like 8 or 9 or even 10, I guess. It's sort of this like turn-based attack, choosing a certain attack their weakness type of thing, whatever. It is extremely fun. If you have a Switch at your house and you're looking for something to do for 30 minutes or 45 minutes or something like that as a workout in the house, you're going to look like a total goon doing it. But boy, is it fun. Like, quite honestly, it's more fun than it should be. But it's got one problem, right? So when you do it, and I'm going to see, I probably should have pulled this up before. And let me see if I could grab something here really quick. Is really fast here. I'll pull it up. Here we go. So when you're done with your workout though, so what you get is like this screen here that shows you everything that you did, right? And the cool thing about this is that it shows you like exactly everything you did, and actually you could also see it in aggregate too. So like whatever, did 92 ring presses. We got about 1,300 here. Like I was saying, though, the problem with this is that you can't get the data out of the switch, right? They don't offer any APIs. They don't automatically export it or do anything like that. You can't integrate it with like Google Fit, or you can't integrate it with like the Apple Health stuff or anything like that. And so what I want to do is build an application where you could take a photo of the screen here, and then I'm going to ship the photo up to Azure Cognitive Services to do some OCR and some processing on it to pull out all the text. And then what we'll do is we'll give the user a way to import the data from there back into one of those platforms, or have it so that they could do something with it. For today's stream, at least, I think we're going to be looking primarily just at the mobile application setup for this, and kind of the, hey, you know, now that we've got something here, or now that we've got this stuff here, you know, the workflows and stuff like that we'll need to process it and get it moving along. So, yeah, so we're just going to be working through the mobile application for, or, you know, the mobile side of it. We're not going to do, I think I'm going to do an Azure function to do the OCR calls and some of the cleanup and processing and stuff like that. But today, like I said, we're going to be doing kind of the mobile side of it. So some screens to take photos, maybe to see like old results and stuff like that. So cool. So let's go ahead. Let's just dive right in and get started. What I always do is I almost always use VS for Mac. I know, you know, that's contentious or whatever you want to say in the community. I know some people that love it, some people that hate it. Personally, I love VS for Mac. You know, it's got faults and stuff like that, but so does everything. And it's like, it's pretty nice. I also just really like working on the Mac in general, though. It's pleasing to me. So let's go ahead. Like I said, we're going to do a Xamarin.Forms application. So we'll just start off with a multi-platform app, and we'll do a blank forms app over here. We'll choose next. Our app name, call it like Ring Fit. Okay, we'll do Ring Fit Importer. I don't know, we'll maybe clean this up later on, but it's good enough for now. We'll target both platforms out here, Android and iOS, for today. We probably won't get to the part where we're doing any import or anything like that, so we'll just kind of keep that simple here. Next up, we've got our choice on what to use, right? Net standard or shared library. If you're new to it, if you're new to .NET development, or if you're new to mobile development with Xamarin, the two choices here, and I'll do like sort of a very simple explanation for today of this, I guess, is when we build our mobile application, we could choose where we put code that will be reused across multiple platforms. Where can we write code that we'll use in both iOS and Android and whatever platforms maybe that we add in the future? One of the options, I'll say, the first option we'll look at here, I guess, is shared code. Where what shared code is essentially is it'll build like a project in .NET that doesn't compile itself. It's a project that holds code and holds, you know, image files and whatever else you want to put into it. It doesn't really matter, but it's basically just like a project that's going to need to get glued onto another project, right? So it'll basically get attached to like a host project, like the Android project, for example, and then it will compile down on that platform. The cool part about that is you can sort of put all your stuff in one code project. You could throw like everything in there. You could do things like compiler directives. So you could say like hashtag if iOS or Android, we could put some platform specific code in there, because we could actually sprinkle in some code that tells it if you're on Android or iOS, go do these certain things. I typically avoid doing this though. It's useful for some certain use cases. Like I know, if you're, you know, working with a bunch of like C libraries and doing a bunch of imports, or if you're doing like, you know, some light code sharing stuff, could be pretty helpful. My concern, I guess, is always that if I use this, I'm going to end up writing just a bunch of spaghetti code where I've just got a bunch of interspersed if-def statements and stuff like that. That doesn't seem like a great long-term solution, I suppose, right? So typically what I do is .NET Standard. If you're not familiar with .NET Standard, it's sort of like cross-platform .NET. So it doesn't have any knowledge of Windows or Mac or Linux or iOS or Android or anything like that. It's sort of the core parts of .NET. So if you're building an application, this is where we could put our models. This is where we could put view models. This is where we could put, even for Xamarin.Forms or UI definitions and stuff like that, because the UIs themselves don't know about the platforms. And so this is my typical starting point here. So we'll choose that. And then if we ever need to do any like platform specific stuff, we've got a number of different ways we could do it. We've got interfaces that we could use to bridge gaps, events or notification buses, stuff like that. So we've got ways to talk across platforms. All right, so we'll just do a ring fit importer here. I guess it's good enough. We'll use git out here, and we'll fire that up. Yeah, we had, well, it's kind of going here. So we had a camping trip planned for this weekend where we're actually going to go camping in a cave up in Wisconsin, which is pretty cool. My oldest son has actually done this trip before, and he had a great time doing it. But last night and into this morning, we got dumped on with about 6 inches of snow or so. And it's like a 3-hour drive, I think, from our house to the campgrounds. And like, apparently the last 5 or 6 miles are treacherous on like a nice day. So, this is something through Scouts. This is a, thing, both my boys are in Scouts. And so, they decided to cancel it, which I think is the right decision. We would have been driving, for about 8 hours, I think, to get up there. If we ever even made it up there. So I got a little bit of time back this morning and thought it'd be cool to work through this stuff. So cool. So let's go ahead and let's take a look out here. So we've got our new project, right? And it's just our starter project out here. Nothing too fancy, right? We just have our, this is our .NET Standard project out here, our ring fit importer. We can see that it's pulling in Forms already and Xamarin Essentials. I love that they have both of these pulled in here for new projects. I love Xamarin Essentials, by the way. Like, I don't know if you guys use it or not, or if you're not familiar with it. It's sort of, it's taken all this like huge ecosystem that we had in the Xamarin world for plugins and things that do all kind of platform specific interactions, like, getting location information or device information or interacting with file systems, like all that kind of good stuff, and sort of standardizes it into one NuGet package. So it's like, even if you're not using Forms, if you're building something using like Xamarin Native, then you could pull this in and it'll help us do something. I got a question here quick. Have I used Shiny? I have indeed used Shiny, and I love it. That is Alan Ritchie's plugin. It's sort of like, it's not Essentials. It's it's other stuff that I don't really think would probably go into Essentials. If you're not familiar with it, I could probably pull it up here. Quick. Alan's awesome. Such a great person to have as part of our community. Spell Alan's name wrong. R-I-T-C-H. Shiny is sort of like a plugin library for doing a bunch of other stuff cross-platform, similar to how Essentials works. But you get a bunch of other things like, I don't know if he has like all of it listed out here. Here we go. Beacon interaction, Bluetooth LE interaction, which if anybody here has ever done Bluetooth, it is somewhat difficult. It could be somewhat difficult to work with. I've done probably like 10 Bluetooth LE integration projects over the years, and each one has its own challenges for sure. So this is cool because it helps standardize that across platforms. The locations, I don't know what HTTP transfers is, probably for like large file transfers or something like that, if I had to guess. I haven't actually worked with that one. Sensors, notifications, push, all that kind of good stuff. So this is sort of like complementary to Essentials, where this goes above and beyond and does a lot of like hardware integration work out there. It also has pretty good integration with ReactiveUI. I know that Alan himself is pretty into the ReactiveUI, reactive extensions as well, which speaks to me directly. So yeah, big shout out to this. If you haven't used it before, it says it's beta. You know, I think this is just Alan wanting to be conservative about it. It's definitely ready. Like, we've used it. Sounds like some of you guys have used it. Yeah, location, we just use it for notifications on a project. This week or last week, I can't remember. We just put it all in, and it simplified. You know, everything was so simple to get going. So, absolutely highly recommend it there. Since I'm here, I might as well take a minute, just kind of show off the libraries that we'll be using here for our app today, right? So, ReactiveUI is going to be our first one that we take a look at here. And I'll go take me to that site. ReactiveUI, so it's a MVVM framework if you're not familiar with it. Gives us the ability to do cool things like you see here. It's sort of a reactive extensions integration with for user interfaces, right? So it's basically something to say, you know, it's sort of like a bindings layer in a way, if you will, for setting up our view models and then for gluing them to our user interface. So we've got things to listen for, like change notifications. Here in this example, we're listening for a change notification. We're telling it to hold on to those change notifications, basically for 0.8 or for 0.8 seconds, right? To say to wait out here for any changes to come through. So if somebody's typing fast with the throttle, we won't push all the changes through. We'll basically throttle it back to ensure that we just sort of get like the last search query through there. We could trim it up, you know, so we could transform the data. If the data hasn't changed, we could filter it so that we just get new notifications through here. You know, we could also do things like another filter out here with this where, saying like, hey, only let these things through if we actually have like a value that was sent through in the query. We could tell it where to observe on. So, you know, tell it, hey, crazy, let's just go somewhere. That's cool. I didn't realize that, sorry. We could tell it to observe on the main thread scheduler, so we could guarantee that stuff runs on the UI thread, right? And then down here, we could tell it to go invoke a command. So gives us the ability to do really cool stuff like that. Awesome project. You know, huge thanks to everybody who's involved in this project and does a bunch of work. You know, I know we got like Glenn and Rodney, Anna, you know, like everybody who's involved out here. There's a ton of people that have done a ton of work to get everything set up out here, you know, and keep this project going. So, you know, if you're interested in working on this thing, you know, we could always use more help on the documentation side, you know, and things like that. Everybody, you know, it's always the hardest part for this. Well, everybody here on the court. But yeah, if you've got interest in doing stuff with reactive extensions and working on it here, take a look out here. You know, help these guys out, or do what you can to help out if you've got some interest in it or what. Yep. Huge shout out to everybody here on the team. We'll be pulling that in to help us do our MVVM stuff. We're gonna do for our UI. Excuse me. Be using this is my control library, so I could talk about this one a little bit. Shameless plug. So this is Aurora Controls. So we built this to help sort of extend out the basic control library for Xamarin.Forms, right? So Xamarin.Forms comes with a whole ton of controls, but what we wanted to do is add, you know, some of the stuff that we knew that our clients were asking for over and over again. So, you know, we've got like some gradient controls, we've got different gauges and loading type of controls out here. There's a whole effects engine on Aurora Controls, so you could do things like real-time transformations of your UI, so you could like pixelate things or recolor it, or on the fly apply different processing to your rendered components. So I'm pretty proud of it. I think it's a cool thing. It is. We do have a free version that's pretty limited. You could come out here and you can grab it. It's just got a few controls built into it here to kind of get you started. We do have, we do have a project out here. I should probably do a better job of like telling people about this, but this is a Aurora Borealis, right? This is just our sample project that we have out here for people to play around with. And this has a full license attached to it of the Aurora Controls. So if you ever want to get your hands on it and kind of play around and see everything that's available out there, this library or this project, this sample project, has everything you need to get up and running. So like I mentioned, we'll be using this to do some of our UI layout and stuff like that, or not layout, maybe some of the layout. We'll be using it primarily for doing just adding controls and stuff to the UI out here. So cool. So let's go ahead and we'll get started here with pulling in our packages. One of the cool things that we got recently out here in Visual Studio for Mac is the ability to manage NuGet packages, similar to how we could do it in Windows. So there's been a plugin to do this for a long time, but it was never part of the core, core Visual Studio for Mac. You always had to install the extension. So we've got this built in now, and I absolutely love it. We're gonna add in a few things here. And grab pre-release packages here. (2019) font. Go. I'll add that, and then we've got this. We have two different like primary versions of Aurora Controls: Core, Lite, which is the free version. Core, which includes like all of our things that we think are like ready to go live for sure. And then Experimental, which I'll pull in Experimental. I don't know that we'll have anything that we'll use from it, but we'll pull it in anyway. Experimental control contains all the controls that we don't think are really fully ready for prime time, if that makes sense. We want to get them out there so that some of our clients could play around with them, or we might even have them included for some projects that we do, or things like that. If somebody's asking for some stuff, we'll throw it out there in Experimental. You could always try them, but the APIs that we put out there for Experimental might not stay, or we might have to tweak the control, or we might even have to abandon it if it just doesn't turn out that it doesn't seem like it's going to turn out entirely. So we're going to pull those two in here, so we'll just add those packages. And that's all three projects here. Sign our soul over to get access to Kia because it's worth it. While it's doing that, I think I could actually come back here. I can start getting the other packages set up. So typically, this is where we would come and do ReactiveUI. So if you're doing this at your own, if you're your own project or anything like that, looking to get this set up, what you're going to want to do is come out here and grab ReactiveUI and ReactiveUI XAMForm. And in fact, we could actually even add these to the project. So I'll add these in. It's not going to hurt anything. Additionally, highly recommend you check out ReactiveUI Fody, which is probably good just to take a moment here while this stuff's adding in and whatnot. I'll show you Fody quick because I find a lot of people haven't used it before. So Fody is going to, let's see, Fody. Sure. Fody out here is a plugin for the .NET ecosystem that does some compile time manipulation to your .NET assemblies. So you can see extensible tool for weaving .NET assemblies. What that means basically is that let's just go find where's all the. Let's go find. Oh no, I don't care how they're discovered. Just show me the cool list of plugins. Did I miss it? Plugin for us? No. There's a list of plugins. But essentially what you do is you write, oh, here we go. you write a plugin for Fody, and what it does is at compile time is it'll look at your code. Typically, it'll be looking for some attributes out there in your code, or maybe some particular patterns that you've set up in your code. And then at compile time is it will go into your code and change the way that your code is implemented just at compilation time. So it sounds weird, but we'll take a look. There's like one that's fairly straightforward. So property changed. So a lot of people are familiar with doing like iNotify property changed. So here, this is a great example. So what we could do with Fody is normally in the .NET world, if you want to make like a view model or an object that can notify out whenever its properties get changed, right? So like whenever the given name or the family name gets what you have to do is you have to write a bunch of like boilerplate code, similar to what you would see out here. And it's kind of a pain in the butt, and you write it over and over and over and over. Huge pain. What you could do with Fody is basically we could add in this property changed plugin. And then what it's going to do at compile times, it's going to look at any object in our code that implements iNotify property changed. And what it's going to do is it's going to transform our, in this case, like our public properties into iNotify property changed properties. So we could keep our code, from our source code perspective, our code stays nice and clean. And then at compile time, though, we get all that additional magic that we want to have happen. It even does some pretty cool things. Like here you can see I've got this full name property, which is a calculated property based off of two other properties. And it's smart enough to know that, whenever our first name or our last name updates, we actually want to have it go ahead and update that given name property, or that full name property, excuse me. So it does all that stuff for us sort of automatically, which is pretty awesome. Like, it's really nice for us to have something. We do have a ReactiveUI library that does similar stuff for us out here. Where basically what it's going to do, it doesn't, I don't know if there's anything for this package to see really, just right back to ReactiveUI, but it's going to do the same type of stuff. There's just a change notification pattern that we have out here in ReactiveUI that it will just inject in for us to do reactive properties. So just a really nice thing to help us get up and running. So we're going to pull these three projects in here, ReactiveUI, Fody, and Xamarin.Forms. I probably don't need to add the Fody one to the Android and iOS projects, but I don't think it's going to hurt anything. So we'll just add those three packages out here to all of our projects. Popped in here. And I am going to add one additional thing in here. So this is actually, I mentioned it earlier, some proprietary stuff. This is internal library that we use for doing a lot of our development. It's called Big Bang. If anybody can name who this icon is, you get bonus banana stickers. Uh-oh. Had something choke out here for us. Let's see. Let's see if we can find out. But we'll add Big Bang in here in just a moment. And essentially what that's... Oh, okay. I just need to update Xamarin.Forms so we can see here. It's complaining that couldn't import it because it's looking for a certain version of Xamarin.Forms. And the one that we have is just a little bit older. So we'll update. We'll do that really quick here. And then we'll add that back in. We'll stay with stable on this one. And we'll update it. That updated. Again, while it's getting updated here, like I mentioned, so we've got our own library out here, and I'll just search it up again. So it's this is just like an internal library. Really what this is for me, more than anything, is just a structured way for me to write my code. With my team and I, with different people working on a project, everybody has their own little nuances with how they write their code, which is okay, by and large. But we need to make sure that in general, everybody follows the same development patterns and practices, right? So, ideally in my world, everybody should write code like me, which is probably what everybody else thinks. But but you know, we know that that's not always going to be the case. And so really what this Big Bang framework's going to do, as you guys will see, is it's just going to give me some rails to make sure that I write things in a consistent manner. It's really all that it's going to do. There's some helper methods and stuff like that in there that I could probably explain when we use them. But by and large, just going to be some scaffolding for me just to make sure that I write this in a way that people at my company can also maintain. But again, none of the stuff that we do is like that we're going to use, or the libraries that we're going to, you know, the components that we use or anything like that are really going to be super nuts or proprietary. It's really just, you know, it's all stuff that you could recreate. It's probably the easy way to say it. So we'll wait for forms to go just to make sure that it's not going to bomb out on us. Big Bang is not public on NuGet. Correct. Yeah. So we got a question here. Is Big Bang public on NuGet? So it is not. We have our own NuGet feed and stuff like that, and we license it out to all of our clients. So like if you work with us, we just give you like a perpetual license to Big Bang. It's not something that I would say I do because you know, I'm like, oh, it's mine and I want to keep it to me or anything like that. It's just I really, this might sound bad, but it's a fairly evolving and very opinionated package, and we just don't open source it because I know you know, people are going to have their own opinions, I suppose, and want to be able to make suggestions and modifications to it and stuff like that. And realistically, all it is, like I said, at the end of the day, is sort of just a bunch of helper stuff. There's like some slight tweaks and some extension methods and stuff like that, but you know, it's really ReactiveUI with some additional extension methods. At some point in time, I would like to take good parts of Big Bang and move them just out to ReactiveUI in general. I think that there's like some cool extensions that we've built out there that would be helpful for pretty much anybody doing ReactiveUI development. But yeah, like I said, by and large here, it's just it is an internally held project. But as you'll see, to do forms, as you'll see, there's really nothing too totally crazy in it here. So this rip in, we'll add these packages in, and then once we get that set up out there, we'll be good to go. Yeah, not open source. Maybe one day, like I said, we'll be, you know, our goal. I've chatted with Rodney a little bit over on the ReactiveUI team saying like, hey, you know, if there's parts of this that you'd want to go through and comb and pull out to bring into, you know, into core ReactiveUI, that's cool. You know, so like if, yeah, so hopefully some of this stuff will bleed out and get out there later, but yeah, just internal for now. More, like you said, you know, I'll keep my opinion to myself on this one, or, you know, just kind of keep it so we can maintain. But one day, maybe. All right, so we're just going to wait for this to kick up here. While this is going, we're going to need to do some initialization stuff. So we'll come out here. We're going to have Aurora. Okay, we're gonna set up the Aurora controls here, so we're just gonna initialize these. Normally you'd have to pop in your serial key here. I'm using an internal feed of this project that that doesn't make me have to put in a serial key. Pop this in here. Trying to get that stuff set up there. So like I said, normally you just pop your serial key out here and that does the initialization. It does, our serial keys do for Aurora, they do match back to the name of your project. So like in this case, it would be doing a validation check like on the bundle identifier here for iOS, for example. So just make sure that whatever you use for the bundle identifier matches up with your serial key to get that stuff. All right, so cool. So we're here. We've got our application. I'm actually just going to nuke this out. I know people seem to hate me for this. I don't use XAML for anything. It's not my thing. So I'm just going to add, we're just going to add a new app out here. Call it app. Yep. Right. And this is where you'll start to see some of the stuff that we have like from Big Bang get pulled in here. So for example, like instead of using just regular application, I've got this application base out here, which is just going to give me a method to set up services. Dan knows about my, everybody knows about my XAML non-love. That's fine. We all get along, right? So one of the things that like Big Bang will give me here is like a lot of base classes is one of the things that we've got. So here, like I've got a setup services, which is where I could just do like dependency registration and stuff like that. So I'll just kind of leave that empty out here for the moment. In terms of UI then, or in terms of getting everything set up in my shared project, typically what I'll do is I'll set up a folder called user interface. We'll have another one called view models. We'll have another one called values. And actually, I'm gonna lazy code my way through some of this stuff here. I'm gonna go open another project on the side and borrow some stuff out there from out there. So we'll remove this. Nuke that out of here. I think this stuff should still be good. We still have our app out here. Yep. And we can leave the XAML compilation on, but it won't matter for anything for us. Let's see. What else might we need out here? I'll just add it because you never know if we'll need this stuff. I just usually stub all these out. So we'll have a conventions folder. That's probably good for us to get started out here. I do, because we brought in, we did bring in Fody Weaver, the Fody component for doing ReactiveUI. I am going to add in a new file here. It's going to be an XML file. And essentially, this is going to be a configuration for our Fody components. So this is FodyWeavers.xml. And then let me just paste in what we need out here. And like I mentioned, what this is going to do is this will allow us to have our view models use that ReactiveUI Fody component. And I should be able to show off what happens there at compile time too. All right, so we've got that set up out here. We've got our base setup out here. Inside a user interface, we're going to add a few more folders. So we're going to do one we'll call cells. So that way if we have any list views, we could put all of our cells in there. We're going to have pages. And we're going to have views. Again, you know, if you structure your stuff differently, there's nothing wrong with that. This isn't the be-all, end-all. Like I said, just kind of showing how I do this stuff usually. If you have a different approach or if you do things differently, there's nothing wrong with that. You know, it's totally cool. So just do whatever makes sense for you. Right, so we've got the core structure out here. I think for our app that we build, I'm probably going to do it as a tabbed page as the root. I'm not 100% on this yet, but I feel like this is probably the way that I want to go. So let's go ahead and we'll set up a new class out here. Call this general class. We'll call this app. Call this man, what do I call this one? Tab container. I don't know. I hate naming this one. It's a thing, you know, it does stuff. Tabbed. Tab page base, which is going to take something like view model not tab. Add that in just a second. Okay. Again, you'll notice that we're doing some stuff here for we're doing some stuff here that's using Big Bang components. So you'll see out here this Big Bang Forms pages. I'll explain. I'm not using App Shell, and I'll explain why in just a moment. I'd love to, but I'm not going to use it, unfortunately. And I'll explain why in a moment. So it basically, you know, again, this is just a structural thing that comes with the way that we've got our framework set up here. Is you'll notice that I've got this call out here for setup user interface, and then this call out here for bind controls. And basically what this is going to do is, you know, if you've ever done like XAML code before, this is essentially like the equivalent of, you know, your initialize or init component type stuff. Where it's going to go and, you know, depending on how you have your XAML set up, it'll either parse it or just set up your UI and present it back to your page or your view or whatever you're doing in Forms. Since we're going to do all this stuff in code, this is where we just write our code for doing our UI setup. It just gives me a place to do all of my UI setup. And then separately, because because ReactiveUI's bindings are disposable, I actually have this method out here called bind controls that I use. Is a gateway for setting up controls to, or setting up our view model to be bound to our controls. And so this is just where we put all of our ReactiveUI sort of glue code, you know, reactive extensions, ReactiveUI glue code, stuff like that. We had a question out here, use App Shell. App Shell is awesome. I really like it. And it offers a ton of really cool features, like simplifies the way that you set up a lot of these components and makes them pretty flexible. And maybe at some point in time, we'll switch over this project even to using App Shell. There is specifically with tabbed apps and Android, which is probably going to be the primary use case for this particular app, at least to get started. I think I'll probably I'm going to build out the components for Android first. There's an issue with Shell right now that when you switch between tabs, it actually reloads the tab. So the content doesn't stay loaded on the tab, you know, when you go back and forth. So it causes it to like refresh the page. It's not a huge thing, but it's like enough of a thing where I think it's going to make me kind of nuts dealing with it. And so we're probably not going to do it for today. If, like I said, if they fix that issue, they're aware of it. You know, Shane, I know I've talked with Shane as part of the Forms team, and he's already, I think, done a little bit of work for it. I just don't know that it's fully live. If that's fixed, then I think we could probably switch everything over to using Shell. But just the way that this particular project happens to be structured because of the tab container, it unfortunately probably makes it not a great option for Shell. But normally, it would be something that would be, you know, it would be something that we would investigate or probably lean towards using at this point in time. So, you know, Shell just kind of changes the way that you do some of your core project setup, like your navigation and stuff like that, and offers some pretty neat functionality and features to it. So maybe not, you know, like I said, not today, but maybe in the future. And And also too, let me know if you guys, how the fonts are looking and stuff like that. I bumped the fonts a little bit. I could probably bump them a little bit more here, but it makes sense to kick these up a little bit more too. So we're actually going to make our view model here. It helps if you could spell. But here's our tab container view model. And again, this is just going to be, I'm going to pull something from Big Bang here, but really all it's doing is it's just sort of a pre-built view model. We go look at the source for it here. It doesn't do a whole bunch. You know, again, you could make your own, roll your own one of these. It's pretty straightforward. This one just has, it's based off of reactive objects, so it's a view model that would be similar to what, you know, if you want to make your own view model base with your own reactive UI project, you just use reactive object out there as a starting point. We've got some properties out here to do things like, you know, maintain loading. This is a loading Boolean that you can, like a multiple assignment, multiple unassignment Boolean. So if you assign is loading twice, it will stay loaded until you unassign it twice, if that makes sense. And then just has a few other little things here for just doing some disposable configuration, some logging, stuff like that. Really, again, nothing all that crazy. It just kind of gives me, like I mentioned earlier, just gives me some structure to make sure that when me and my developers are writing our code, that we write it in a consistent manner. So we'll just get this set up here. And you'll see that we've actually resolved it out here. We will need to, out in our app, we need to say this.main page. So a new user interface pages tab container here. And we should be able to go and run our super hot application. Now I'll just go and verify that things are working. Give it a shot. Just see what we get. Shove that off to the side a little bit. He's yelling at us here. Oh. You know what? I think that's just an order of operations thing. Let me do... That's probably me just setting up the Aurora Controls. Probably need to have this one lower than there. This we'll just put... We'll try and run that again. We, as part of Aurora, we do some inspection of like the runtime platform that you're on and things like that, and we just base it off of some things that come out of forms. So it's probably what that's complaining about there. Renderer, resolver. Oh. New to me. Figure that out in just a moment here. We'll see what's going on there. Double check just to make sure. You know what? I think I some Big Bang stuff I got to set up here. It's one of the problems with doing. See, this might get it. This might. Bang setup out here. Let's tell this guy to go do some visualization out here. Aurora Controls have no other dependencies. Like you don't have to do anything with the Aurora Controls. You know, outside of Xamarin.Forms, really, outside of Xamarin.Forms and Skia Sharp, we really don't have any other dependencies. But just want to get all this stuff loaded up here quick. Let's see. This one. And we just have some initialization stuff out here, and this one here. Explain what this one does in a moment. Inactivity. I forgot to pull this in earlier, but this is embedded resource loader. What this will actually do, it's kind of neat. We have this as part of Aurora. What it will do is it'll scan your library, whichever library that it's currently running on or hosting, or you could specify a different one if you want. And it will scan that library for any embedded resources. Specifically, really what we're looking for there are fonts and SVG files. And it will take those and pre-cache those and do some work with them so that if we need to go and do some SVG interaction with our application, it will go and render those out and have all the sizing right and everything like that for the particular platform. So it'll just kind of do some cool work for us so that we don't have to toss in a bunch of different icon sizes. Like if you've ever done anything with, we don't have anything in here right now. If you've ever done anything with like iOS in the past, you'll know that you've got different density screens. So you've got like your old iOS devices that were like your regular density. You've got your Retina screens, which are like your 2x density plus. We go all the way up to like 3 or 4x now. I can't remember in terms of pixel density. Typically what you do is you would have to throw in icons into all of your projects that are scaled up to match that pixel density. So, you know, the pixel density is, it's like, if we think of like logically what a pixel is, and we've got one that's 3 by 3, you know, so 9 pixels in total. If you're on a regular density display, it's 9 pixels. On a high density display, each one of those pixels could be made up by even 9 pixels themselves. Right, so physical pixels, like the real small things actually emitting light, or the LEDs potentially on the screen emitting light, if we're using like a phone. Each one of those that we think of logically might even be made up of like 9 physical pixels on the device, right? So what we'll do is, instead of loading all those different resource sizes into our app, is we'll just throw in some SVGs and let the framework figure out how to size those appropriately. Which is kind of nice out there. And we'll pull this into, I'm going to come out here and just grab this one. So we're going to grab that. We'll come back to here. Pop this one in. Again, this is just saying to go grab some assemblies or go grab some components out of our shared project here. So we're just telling it go pieces out of here. Let's rebuild this. Here is our beautiful application. Tab around the bottom. And nothing else going. So let's start making some pages and kind of getting some actual functionality started up here. So like I said, so the whole goal, kind of going all the way back in case you're joining a little bit later here. The whole goal here is I want to take photos. See, we'll grab another photo. Here, you can see I grab the. We're going to take photos of. What I want the app to do is essentially allow the user to take a photo of their TV. And when they take a photo of the TV, we're going to take that photo, send it out to an Azure function. The Azure function is then going to call Azure. I guess it's part of cognitive services, the OCR components. It's going to OCR the image, And I've already got some stuff built for that, and it seems to work pretty well, actually. So, like, I try to get pictures from a bunch of different angles and stuff like that. Look like this. It does a pretty good job of, like, parsing through all the text, getting everything figured out, pulled out for us. And then what I'll do is I will have it clean up the payload, send a value back to send the result back to our mobile device. And then from there, we'll allow the user to import the results into whatever their fitness platform is. So I think to get started, we'll probably do like Google Fit. That's the one I use. I carry a Pixel phone around. But there's no, we could probably use like the HealthKit stuff or whatever out there on the Apple side. And I'm sure we could interface our way into to do it. So I think we'll need like 2 screens to start. We'll probably need like a photo capture, like a page where we'll actually do the photo capture and stuff like that. And then we'll need another page, maybe just to view history or view stuff that you've done in the past. So just a starting point. So let's go out here and let's add some new files in. And we'll do a capture. We'll do workout capture. And again, we'll do this as this is going to be a content page base, and content page base always needs a view model attached to it or provided to it. I'll show you content page base here from a high level too, just to show you that it's not anything like super crazy. There's going to be view models, and we'll call this the workout capture view model. And it's going to complain just because it wants some of these here. I always reorganize these methods too. It puts them in alphabetically for setup or bind controls before setup user interface, but logically, like in my head, I think I always should set up the user interface first, then bind the control. I just read those. If we take a look at content page base, just to kind of show you what's going on here, in case you want to set something up like this similar to yourself, it just inherits from reactive content page. So you'll see here that's something that comes straight from ReactiveUI. Right, so nothing that you couldn't build off on your side there. We've got some helpers for just doing some life cycle detection things for us. And then the rest is basically just components out here just to make sure that we pattern things in a similar way. That's pretty much it. Like, so nothing all that crazy for what it's worth. Right, but it just gives me a little bit of structure out here to do things the same way. Let's go and build out that view model then. So view models dot capture view model. I set this up as something stupid, didn't I? I set it up as like an XML file. Hold on. There we go. Okay, and we've got that out here. I'll just pull that out so it doesn't crash it. And like I said, we'll have our history. So we'll just we'll add another class out here for our pages, and we'll call this workout history. And again, that's going to be a content page base. We'll just replace that there. Cool. Cool. And we'll do one more class out here. Gonna be our workout. We'll set that to view model base out here and that abstract class. Cool. So we got that set up here. Get that going there. Cool, cool, cool. I think we got our whole framework here. So we'll just add those into our tab container. So our tab container has a setup user interface. Yeah, so yes, content page base. So we had a quick question out here. Is content page base part of Big Bang? It is. But like I mentioned, content page base, it's really just a wrapper around ReactiveUI's reactive content page. So like none of the stuff that I see here, you know, is really like super special. It really all comes as part of that reactive content page. More or less, what I have out there is just to give it a little bit more framework so that we do things consistently. That's really the big point of it. It's got a few other little things in there, but nothing groundbreaking or nuts or anything like that. You know, like I said, it kind of just gives us a way out here to structure our code so that I do it consistently across projects that I work on. And then we can set up those pages into our tab container. So we could say this dot children add in a new workout capture, and we'll add in a history here. So cool. So we got the two of those set up. We can just automatically assign the view model for these. So this is something that you get with part of ReactiveUI in the content page. Is you'll notice that you have this new property as part of your views and your content pages. If you use the ReactiveUI versions of them. So here we've got view model, and I'm just going to assign my view models out here. For those, probably need to set one up for my tab container. So stop model. Clean up all that stuff here, and for our history as well. Oops. Cool. All right. So again, let's give it a quick run just to make sure I didn't bust anything horribly. I mean, you can't tell, even if these pages are on here, it just didn't die. Right? I have no titles, I have no icons, I have no nothing, right? So we're in, I think. It didn't die, I suppose. So we're in good shape. Good enough shape. Right. Cool. So I had this idea like 2 days ago, so I haven't really put a ton of thought into how I want the UI to look. I have a subscription over here to this site called UI8, UI8.net, if you're interested. I pay them money. They don't give me any money. This isn't like an endorsement or anything, but it's a really cool site that we use to find sort of like pre-built user interfaces. You know, they're built for Illustrator or built for this tool that I use on the Mac called Sketch out here, which is sort of like a vector-based image editing app. And really what it is it will give us some sort of like pre-built templates. They've got a bunch of other cool stuff out here too, but like pre-built templates for doing things. We're kind of building out our apps, I guess, is probably the better way. Take a look. I don't know. Let's see what they've got out here and see if there's something that we can try to build and mimic. So let's take a look at like health. We'll look at iOS. Social services seems too. Doctor Plus seems too clinical. Kind of nice. We'll take a look at this one. Finance app. Dating mobile app. Looking for one that kind of looks. We're just going to use it again for like inspiration more than anything. Like dark palette ones. What's chat's thought on this? Light or dark theme? I'm dark theme everything. Using light theme now is hard. Know what you guys think? I do dark theme for development, and anything that has a dark theme, I basically put it on. Yeah, big fan of the dark themes. I don't know. Let's take a look at this one here. We'll snag one of these. Preview. This looks cool. Looks nice. I like how clean everything is. Like people, you know, we've gone through like a phase where I think people, you know, we first got mobile devices, we tried cramming everything onto a screen and trying to make it look like, I don't know, very sophisticated and cool. I like this trend of everything kind of being clean and rounded off and sort of simplified. We do a lot of work with a handful of the companies that we work with are like in construction and stuff like that. And you'd be surprised at, like, you make these like UIs as a developer that you don't really think that people would have a problem using. And then you meet some of these people and like, you're like hands, like they're, you know, each finger's like 2 of my fingers put together kind of thing. You're like, oh, now I see why you have a problem using part of this app out here. So, you know, like I like some of these designs, you know, this wouldn't probably solve all those problems, but clean. Pretty similar. I don't know. Maybe we'll mimic something like this. Kind of just get something like this. That one. All right, let's do this though too. Ring Fit kind of has like a color scheme to it, so maybe we could borrow some of that color scheme. Ring Fit. There we go. So here, we'll just do this. We'll get they use a lot of this like turquoisey color and then a lot of this yellow color. Probably. Probably looking to. Let's take a look here. So I've got this this little application on the Mac here called SIP. And SIP's pretty cool because what you could do is use this to highlight over a color on your screen. Try this one. There we go. And then it will capture that and we'll grab it as the hex value. So we'll actually come out here and we'll do a new class. We'll call this colors. And this will call this the primary color. I don't know, this is what we'll actually use. Man, this is my like L. There we go. And then we'll do like an accent color. And maybe there's like that orangey-ish color that they have out here. I think yellow might be too light. Yellow's pretty hard to read unless you have a good solid background. So maybe we'll come back to that. Maybe we'll try that. Let's see if we can get like an orange. Neon carrot sounds cool, so we're just going to go with that one. SIP Pro. I'll consider it SIP. We'll consider it. Maybe not. All right. Yeah, there we go. Right, so we have some colors set up. It's another thing that I think I'm a little bit bizarre on. I don't use a lot of resource dictionaries. We'll do some stuff with it, and we're definitely going to set up some styles and things like that. We're going to kind of create like one grand resource dictionary. I know I don't probably do this like a lot of other people do this, I guess is what I'm trying to say here. I'm actually going to set up a theme file that will pull into our projects here to use in a little bit. But actually, we'll just do it now. We're here. Might as well just do it now. So kind of get this set up here. So again, I know, the typical way to do this in Forms is to use a resource dictionary. In order to go find your resources, it has to look up. It's got to do like a view chain lookup to find your resources in the resource dictionary. And what I mean by that is like, if you're a button in a page and you're looking to find out what style you have applied to you, you can directly assign the style. That's one thing you can do. If it's an implicit style, what it will do is it'll look up the chain until it finds the, until it goes and finds the appropriate style to be applied to it. So, I just do all this stuff in code and kind of set up my own resource dictionary out here. And we do a lot of like explicit style assignment just so that it loads a little bit faster out there. So let's kind of get this set up here. It'll make sense probably when I show it. Styles. I've got a base class. Base. Style base. Yeah, and just gives me some stuff to set up out here. We're doing some style assignment. But this is basically just going to be our resource dictionary out here for some stuff. So let me just go and steal a little bit of code. Let's see. We'll just do page. Let's go snag one. Lazy coding today. Really, again, what my styles does, this would just be a resource dictionary normally. I'm just going to use this to go do just some setup here for my pages to get them. It just basically does some lazy loading and stuff like that, and some style caching out here for my app, basically. So then we had a question out here: how do I get the horizontal dots in the IDE? Yep, that's a plugin out here. So if you go to Preferences in Visual Studio for Mac, there is I think it's in Markers and Rulers, and one of these ones. Show indentation guides. I think it's this one. Yeah. That'll show those out here. So you could follow your curly braces around and see where those go. I have to modify this a little bit. This is actually coming from, I'm using this from a project where we're actually using Shell. So this will be a probably more visual element for some of these ones. Color. We'll just use this. And then we're going to do, we don't want that to be primary. We'll call this like, do this. We're going to do a dark theme. I like the dark theme stuff. So we'll do, we'll call this dark page background. And we'll come out to our colors, and we're going to create a new color out here called probably like a faster way for me to do stuff. I wonder if, oops. Probably a faster way for me to I don't know. We got to find a color we'll use. Maybe we'll just peek it all light. No, I'm not actually pulling down the actual theme. I am licensed for this page, so go and grab whatever here. We'll just try this one here for now, whatever this one is, and see how this turns out. Dark page background here. And then this will be an implicit style that's going to be assigned. I don't have any keys or anything. I know it's implicit because my style itself doesn't have any keys applied to it, and I'm just going to toss this into my app resources. And so I'll just have to do a little bit of assignment here with this one as well. Again, I know some of this stuff is, you know, like it's proprietary for what it is, but realistically, you know, like I think I do public. And I've got to do a current out here. Some of the stuff comes out of my library out here, but like I mentioned, it's there's nothing too crazy in here. It's mostly structure more than anything else. You could replace this with just doing regular, XAML type stuff. There's, for your content pages and for your resource dictionaries and all that kind of stuff. It's totally fine. Like I said, this is just how I write my code. I guess I could probably, couldn't I? But whatever works good for you, I don't really get into holy wars too much. I will express my opinion when asked, but I usually don't get too far into what's right and what's wrong out there about things, right? Everyone's setup's a little different. So go ahead, we're just going to double check that things are good here. This is where like hot reload for code would be cool. But we got it for XAML. We'll pray to the looks cool. We will pray to the Xamarin gods. Hot code reload here someday. We've got if you haven't seen the Comet project, it's wonderful. It's fantastic. I'm hyped up times 10 on it. Maybe I should be writing this in Comet. We scrap this whole thing and rewrite it in Comet. Not today. No, we're not. Maybe in the future. But Comet's got hot reload in it for code. And oh boy, is it good. You basically just like start hammering on your UI and code and automatically things start updating in your simulator or whatever you're running it against. It's quite good. Clancy's been working on that. James Clancy, part of the Xamarin team, has been working on it. The Microsoft team now, right, has been working on that, is doing, from what I can tell, a phenomenal job. I know it's still in proof of concept phase, but I really hope that project moves forward. I think it's Comet is, and I'll pull up a link for it if you haven't heard of it or seen it before. If you haven't seen Comet before, like I said, I'll pop the link out of it. So I know, like, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago or so, Flutter, I can't remember when Flutter was introduced. We'll say it was roughly 2 years ago. Flutter was introduced and it hit with like a huge splash and everybody got super hyped about it. Which, like as developers, we all do. Hey, it's something new and shiny and cool, and everybody gloms onto it. But, like, it's fine, and it's in Flutter is awesome. Like, I think it's a really cool project. It strikes at like everything that I like. It's this, hot reload type code, driven code, UI code, excuse me. Really simple, like UI setup and maintenance and management. Skia sharp, like all the way through as a first class citizen. But like, at the same time, I'm a little hesitant to like get crazy in on the Flutter bandwagon. Most of the clients that we work with are .NET shops, so having them have to learn new language just for their mobile stuff isn't great. You know, like it doesn't really fit in with a lot of their pipelines and workflows and stuff, the way that they do things. Xamarin and, you know, Forms and Xamarin Native fit in so nicely to the .NET ecosystem that it makes it, you know, hard not to use Xamarin. Like it just fits so nicely with what a lot of our clients are and their knowledge and stuff like that. And I love it. Like, don't get me wrong. So like, and I've also got like concerns with, you know, Google killing Flutter at some point in time arbitrarily, because they seem to do that type of stuff all the time. But so if you were hyped about Flutter and you're like, why isn't the .NET team doing something about it? Or, you know, why can't we have nice things on the Xamarin side? Again, you know, it's still early. It's not production ready. I'm sure James will tell you the same thing, but it's awesome for what it is right now. And it's basically like Flutter for .NET, right? It follows that same MVU style UI patterns, hot reload, state management. Skia is a first-class citizen. You could actually even use VS Code to write your code for it if you love VS Code. I do love VS Code. Like, write your code for it. It's awesome. Absolutely check out. Absolutely do check out Comet. Listen, we all, you know, if you're a longtime Xamarin developer like me, we all have this like love for Visual Studio on Mac. Sometimes it's better than other times. But Visual Studio Code is a force to be reckoned with. It's so cool. So yeah, so you could write, yeah, like I said, you could write some of your code out there in VS Code. I still think you get the hot reload stuff. I really haven't played around with it too much, but from what I've seen and who I've talked to, I think you still get all the cool things with doing VS Code out there. So it's pretty awesome. But like, again, if you were interested in Flutter before, or even if you're like a Flutter developer and somehow you found me out here and you're watching this video, hey, what's going on? But like, you know, the cool part of this project, I'll say, you know, that like at least Flutter doesn't have today, is, you know, the Xamarin team has all these years of experience putting together these bridges to help us take .NET to other platforms. Which means, you know, when I need to go write a plugin for iOS, I don't have to go and write Swift code. I don't have to go and write Objective-C code. I can actually just sit out here and write C# code. And that's like massively helpful because, you know, when you want to go and write like a plugin natively for iOS, for example, at least for me, it means that if I was doing it in Flutter, I'd have to write that code in Objective-C or write it in Swift, and then write like a binding layer to get back to it. With the Xamarin toolkit and in the .NET ecosystem, what we could actually do is write that whole tool in C# code, and we still have to learn what is going on in the you know, what they're doing in the iOS world and how they pattern out their stuff and how they build their plugins. So we still have to learn about their SDK, but we write against their SDK in a language that we're familiar with, which is phenomenal. It's such a cool thing. So that's one thing that I like for me personally with Comet is we could take all the cool work that's been done out there with this huge plugin ecosystem with Forms and with this huge plugin ecosystem with things with like Xamarin Essentials or with just the Xamarin community in general and NuGet packages. And plus we get this sort of like new style UI design. You know, there's nothing wrong with Forms. To be perfectly honest with you, I foresee us using it for projects going on into the future for who knows how long, right? For quite some time. I don't see an end to it, to be perfectly honest to you, but like, we kind of get this new design pattern out here for building out UIs. And I think Comet, has a lot of really attractive features. So yeah, definitely check it out. I don't remember how I got started on that or where we're going wrong here. Dan's out here taking some jabs at Forms. 2,000 open issues is a thing, but hold on. Before we go further, we're gonna go. Let's go out to Flutter. Let's count the open issues out here. It maxed out, right? So we're, you know, Flutter's gone beyond 2,000 open issues. They're at 7,500 open issues. So 2,000's paltry at this point. Right? So But no, I hear you. I mean, 2,000 still a number. The team does a really good job. You know, like you can't blame the Forms team. It's a difficult thing to maintain. It's a lot of different platforms. You can't make a change without, you know, you got to be careful about making changes so you don't break other things. But, you know, like if we were to do like a Dragon Ball meme, this is over 5,000. It's not 9,000, but it's over 5,000. How can a power level be so high? Yeah, the Forms team's awesome. You know, for such a small team, they do an incredible job. Like the amount of stuff that they kick out and things like that, you know, it's pretty awesome stuff. So, yeah, so I think we've got, I'm going to run the app again. I don't think I've made any changes, but I'm just going to go on the app again because I can't remember how I got started on stuff, but we're going to come back to here. We're looking at some design, I think, right? Yeah, cool. So like I said, so we've got our 2 pages. We're going to have our capture and our history page. Let's go ahead and we'll start stubbing out the capture page. So I think like what I want to do is I want to have something where you could tap a button on the top or import a photo on the top, and then we'll see the photo that you import, and then we'll have like a little loading thing on there to show when we're sending our that we're sending our photo out and processing it. Have we brought, oh, Dan, yeah, Dan asked, have we brought Aurora into Comet? Yes and no. It's not publicly released, but we've been working internally to get, so this is not a Comet project. So this is actually just a Forms project that we see here for what it's worth. But we do have a good swath of our Aurora Controls actually ported over to Comet. And that's something that we're hoping to get fully finished out here. So it might be something I'll be working on a little bit here this weekend, and probably have some of the other team get in here and work on. So we are, as you could imagine, or just hear me talking about it, we're pretty stoked about Comet. We want to make sure that we can get out there and support it early on. So let's come out here to our workout capture. Let's set up our UI. So I always default to grid is my main layout component. Right, it's usually where I set up everything out here just to get up and running. So let's just start out with our main layout. And we'll just stubbed out here. I don't know what our columns or in rows are going to be yet, but we'll kind of get this set up. I know that I'm going to want a few columns out here. Let me grab something really quick. I'll be back in just a moment. Hold on. All right. So usually I come a little bit more prepared, or if I'm building something, especially for a client, we've gone through design sessions. And, you know, this is a Saturday morning. And I'm just kind of hammering through. So whenever I build a UI, if you've ever talked to me or whatever, I probably mentioned this too, but I've got like a grid note paper here. And I use this for designing all of my UIs. As you can kind of see, like this grid layout here is very similar to the grid that we'll use in code. So I draw a lot of my UIs out on here. You know, I'll just kind of napkin sketch them out on, you know, it's just like this quad ruled, they call it, like, it's like engineering paper or whatever, just quad ruled notebook. I'll do a lot of our like napkin type sketches out there on something like that. And then we'll bring those into real sketch and kind of get that going there. The reason why I point that out in terms of while we're talking about the grid here is that I could a lot of times just figure out, my grid layout roughly using something like that. So if I know that I'm going to want to have like a certain amount of columns or a certain amount of rows, drawing it on that quad ruled paper just means that I could transfer that pretty easily to grid in Xamarin.Forms here a little bit. Dan making a call out for absolute layout. We could use absolute layout if we're nuts. Whenever I do like Xamarin.Forms training, my note about absolute layout is that absolute layout means that you should absolutely not use it. That's what that absolute stands out there for. I suppose it's extremely fast in certain circumstances because it gives you the ability to like pixel located or point located, put some items on UI. But other than that, like you really. Grid's pretty good. Grid's super flexible. Yeah, and like Dan points out here, like rarely use it, right? Yeah, use it for like an is busy. Like if you need to do something where you have like a, say like a list view, and then you just want to show like a loading indicator over it. Absolutely out. So, you know, one of the easiest ways to do something like that, because you could just say, I want this loading indicator to be above, you know, whatever my underlying UI is, and then just center it right in the middle. It gives you a super easy way to do that. Sometimes I'll even use a grid to do something like that too. You could do, I'll show like, I could probably actually show this here really quick. There's a different way you could do it with a grid. I don't know that it's any faster, but you can do it this way. I'll just stub this out really quick. I'll do a material circular. Loading. This is a neat trick. Loading. I'm going to do some quick stuff here. Just get this stubbed out. We'll do. What do I want to show behind? Show something else. I'm just going to do it. What kind of button do I want? We'll do. Yeah, I think, yeah, so let's do this like flat button. Photo. Yeah, so you could do it. So in the chat, Dan mentioned like absolute layout. I think if you're wanting to do like an overlay type layout where you've got like I said, this underlaid component, something on top of it, and then you just want to put components on top of it in a certain location. Like for example, if you just want to center a loading indicator out there, I think absolute layout is the fastest probably way to do it. And like Dan says too, it's probably like one of those things where it's a tick faster or something, who knows, where like, will you notice it or is it perceivable to notice? It probably is hard to say. Another way you could do it though, like I'll show here, is you could actually, in Forms, like I said, I know a lot of people that don't know that you could do this, but you could actually stack, controls in the same cell, which is pretty neat. So we'll just say, boy, man, my fingers are not fingering. Take here, and then what we'll say is, dude, what is going on? And layout touch. And we're gonna add take. And we'll pop our loading in here on top of it. So like I was saying, we could kind of we could stack these components on top of each other. So I guess I don't know where the hell these things are gonna play out, so I'm just gonna modify this a little bit here. I'll just center both of these on the page, just so they stack on top of each other. So we can actually stack these controls on top of each other, and then, you know, I probably need to tell this guy too. Yeah, I'm missing keys here. It's kind of nuts. really quick. This is a cool thing. So again, like if we think of our grid out here, so I just have this grid right now just has one row and one column in it. I wonder if I actually have to give it a column definition. Actually call into here. Maybe it doesn't have nothing. See a little bit of something in here. Looking at my screen, trying to figure out. I think we need to do some coloring here. We'll end up moving this to the style, but we'll just do what? See, in our loader, we'll see. Okay, let's try that again. We're gonna make this guy. It's a height request. New column definition out here. Width equals to. This is I'm gonna have to do a row. Here's something that I thought was pretty cool. One of our clients was doing putting some like style formatters in, and he suggested this, and I think this is actually kind of cool. Let me know what you guys think out here. So on the last, so if you're doing like a property constructor here for this object, on the last property, he always leaves a comma on this one. And typically I would always write it like this, right? I'd leave that last, the last comma off there. The reason I would do it is I'd say, I don't know, it looks cleaner this way. But his reasoning is that with this in here, it doesn't hurt anything per se from a compilation perspective. But when you need to add a new line in from like a Git perspective, like if I just need to modify one line here, I don't actually need to go and modify this line and modify that line. I think it's awesome. I think it's a cool little design thing that, it always like bothered me having those in there. And then he kind of explained it to me like, no, you only have one line changed in Git. And I was like, yeah, that's really smart. I think it's a really cool option out there. Cool thing to do just to save yourself a little bit of time dealing with. Well, this looks ugly, but here it is. You can see they're kind of stacked on top of each other. I have to figure out what's going on here. I don't know why this is smushed in like that. It does cut down on the amount of lines changed. That is true. So it does make it look like we didn't get quite as much done, which it's a hilarious take on it. We actually had it was interesting. We had a client where I think I'm just going to do a regular button for now too, by the way, I guess. Let's see. What this ends up looking like. We had a client recently where we performed like a huge refactor on their code. So what ended up happening was we were able to consolidate a bunch of stuff. You know how it is sometimes when you're writing a project, you realize some patterns that emerge, and you have code that's maybe not, it wasn't rewritten twice, but it has like, it followed the same pattern. So we ended up consolidating a bunch of those patterns and built some reusable components, right? And we thought this was really smart because, like, hey, it's a lot easier to maintain. Like, we got rid of all these things that were very similar, and we just found a way to, like I said, kind of convert them into something that was shared across places in the project. In any case, the client got kind of upset about this because they're like, hey, we looked at your Git commits and it looks like you've deleted almost as much, like half as much code as you've written. Like, why would you do that? That's why we want our, you shouldn't ever have to delete code like that. And I was like, well, we cut down all that code because we realized all the, it's a project that we've been working on for multiple years. We've had these patterns that we didn't really initially, recognize at first because new requirements and stuff like that. So I was like, we've simplified everything. But like, the client was upset that we cut stuff down. So it was just a weird thing to just a weird thing. Like, you always want to add code. I don't know if people are looking at it like, don't ever delete code. I was like, what do you guys want us to do? Like, we could have left all that old crap code in there, but personally, like, if you look at any code base, or if I'm writing stuff personally, and I see that somebody's, especially over time, and especially on a big project that you've removed code, I feel like it's usually a good thing. If they're just deleting code haphazardly, that's a bad thing. But like, you're cleaning up your code and standardizing processes, a process. If I see my developers do that, I always see that as a plus. So I don't know. People take weird metrics and stick on them. There we go. There, we got a better looking UI here. Take photos out there. We got our little loading spinner. We're not doing much. Yeah. Give me just a break for 2 moments here. I'm just going to step out for a moment and grab a refill of some water. I'm just going to step away for a second here. I'll be right back, y'all. Got a new visitor, guys. It's behind me is the lazy boy. I've had this thing for a million years. It's basically the dog's chair at this point in time. So if I'm working from home, hanging out in my office, that is where the dog gets to listen to me complain about stuff. Gives me performance review. All right, let's get back. So we've got everything I think we need set up to get our UI laid out here. So let's just start hammering a bunch of stuff in. We'll probably just leave that stuff in there. And we'll take photo. We're going to need import photo. We're probably going to need like an image here to say like actually show on the screen. I don't know what we're going to need below it. I feel like we might need a list view or something. So we're going to show the results that we get back from cognitive services. So we'll start with a list view here. Yeah, we'll just start with the list view and we'll say like cool. And it's probably good to get started here. So let's see. To take photo and import photo, I'll put those side by side. So I'm going to need 2 columns for that one. The photo below it is going to just get set in there. So I'm going to arbitrarily pick something. We'll just say like that's going to be 120 points. Oops. Definition. Then we're going to have our results in there, which will go below it, right? So then results will just be, we will do this, change this up. So the results we're going to say are going to be grid length star. For now, I'm just going to set this to auto. Auto's a little bit slower because it has to look at, so if we're doing this for a row, if you set a row to a grid length of auto, what it's going to do is it's going to look at the height of the controls that are, it's going to look at the columns for that row, and it's going to look at the height for all the views inside those columns, and it's going to choose the height of the tallest control to be the height of the row. It's a little less efficient from a processing perspective, because anytime something happens with that column's view, it's going to replicate up. It's going to need to send out notifications that, hey, my view size has changed, and that's going to cause the layout engine to potentially relay out, parts of the UI again. But we only have 2 columns in there, and if we really want to get super efficient about it, I could probably put in something like 44 or 40-ish to just give us like a default row size. But we'll just leave it to auto for now. We'll clean that up later if we really want to. Got our take photo button out here. We've got our import photo out here. This vertically, we'll leave those be centered, and we'll just get rid of the horizontal options for these ones. Even though they're going to be the same size, so vertical centering is actually not going to do anything for us. It's going to take longer to calculate. Photo. New image. We're going to end up assigning a source to there once we import a photo or do something like that, but I don't really think that we've got anything that we need to assign that to right now. And then we're going to have our results, the new list view. With the list view, if you're doing it in code or if you're doing it in XAML, you should always use the overrided constructor. And we're just going to do recycle element out here. If you're doing something with like a data template selector, you would choose this one. Like if you have multiple different views that you're going to show out there, you could do that one. Typically, though, you just want to use recycle element if you're just showing the same cell over and over and over again. And retain element is the default. Basically, what it's going to do is it's going to create a new item every time you scroll through. So it's the least efficient. But if you have like very dynamically sized cells or something of that nature, that could be pretty helpful for you there. So we'll do this one. We don't actually know what we're going to show in there yet, so I'm just going to leave that thing empty. I do like to do this, though. Oh, here, I'll show it, and then we'll show how we clean that up. And then we've got our loading indicator there, so that's good. Let's see. So take photo is 0, 0. Our import photo is that. Photo itself is going to be 0, 1. And we also need to get that to span 2 columns, so it's going to be grid. Set column span, photo, and you could do this 2 ways. You could hard code this as a 2. Sometimes what I like to do, if the UI is still kind of early, I might grab something before I do this. Say that. We'll just grab it and hold it into an instance variable, so you don't have to constantly, request it. We could tell it to span the amount of columns that we have out there. It's just again, it's just a very small performance thing, but pretty helpful. And we're gonna do something pretty similar here for our results, where that is going to be out there, and that. And then our loading indicator, we'll do row count as well, since we were doing. For our loading indicator, what we're going to do here is we're going to set this one over the whole UI, right? So we're going to set this one here. It's going to be set. Right now, we'll keep that over our whole UI basically the whole time, and we'll hide it. We'll surface it and hide it eventually. We're just kind of doing some UI layout now. Run this quick just to take people what it looks like. Cool. It's about what I expected it to be. We've got some buttons all the way up here because we've got I don't have a navigation page on here. So we need to add, we need to get this push down, basically, right, to take that into effect. That's why those are up here so high. This is where our photo would be right there, and then we've got our list view right here. If you don't like on iOS in particular, if you don't like the fact that it fills this thing with like empty rows out here, an easy way you can get around that in Forms is just to set the footer template equal to, you just do new view, if I remember right. You have to do it like this. Is it a... Might even be a faster way to do that. Yeah, I can't type. Yeah, I always just want to type in view, but it's always content view. Every time I type in view, I'm always like, yep, should have been content view. No, what is this? Oh, I think this is what I wanted to do. I think this should do it. Again. There we go. Yeah, so you just set the footer property here to like just an empty view. It gets rid of the sort of the default items out there, right? So, nice way just if you want to clean it up, just not have those out there. Again, some people like having them out there. Just depends on your use case. So, use what works best for you. You know. All right, let's start building out this view model a little bit. So one of the things that I have out here is part of our view model is just the ability to assign a title, right? So we'll just say like, I want to workout out here. So I'm just going to give this property a workout here. I want to get this title then glued up to the binding for my UI. And I'm just going to do a little bit. I got a bunch of crap open here. So let's just go ahead and nuke some of this out. Don't need that. Don't need that. Don't need any of these. Okay. Some of this cruft cleanup. And we can set up our first binding. We'll do just a real simple binding out here. So it's going to be this dot one-way bind. And we're going to tell it that our view model object is the one that's going to emit the notification. The next thing that we need to do is we're going to actually write an expression, and we're going to tell it, hey, expressions actually came up last week too. The expression is going to tell it, hey, here's the property that you want to listen to dynamically, and here if there's any changes that have occurred on the UI, or have occurred to the property, excuse me. And then the last parameter that we're going to do here is going to be the UI element that we want it to update. So in this case, it's going to be my UI's title. I'm going to need to pull in ReactiveUI to do this. And then since all the bindings in ReactiveUI are disposable, I'm going to pull in just another little thing here. Oh, sorry, this is control bindings. So control bindings is something that we have set up as part of our base class out here. So it's just sort of it's a disposable object that we could use to clean up our bindings afterwards. But dispose with comes from ReactiveUI or from system reactive disposables. I think it's actually in the ReactiveUI package though. And dispose with means like, hey, just give me some disposable. And when this thing's ready to be cleaned up, dispose it with this particular object, right? So here, this you'll notice this binding. I don't know if it shows it. It's not, but the iReactive binding itself is iDisposable. So I could take this thing and basically I'm just going to tell it that later on you get cleaned up with this control bindings. So when this thing disposes, I want this to dispose all these other bindings out here as well. A few other things that we need to do is I want to be able to click my take photo button or import photo buttons. So let's go back to our view model and we could set up some commands for those. This is going to be reactive. Going to be a reactive command. I'm going to tell it that you're going to take in a unit, and for now you're going to spit out a unit. I can explain a unit in a moment. And we're going to say take photo. Give this a private setter. And then also I'm going to use that FODI here, and I'm going to say reactive. I'm going to say reactive. Whatever I just put in there. That was like a bunch of gobbledygook. Think about it now. Do I not have? Pretty sure I have it. Nuges. Oh, did I not add? Come out here and manage some Nuges. Hold on a moment. Thought we popped that one in. All right, so we'll just wait for Fody to get out there and get pumped up. Cool. With that added out here, should be able to do, here we go, our Fody helper. And again, like I mentioned at compile time, what it's going to do is it's going to replace this with a version of a property that will raise change notifications for ReactiveUI. We're going to need a take photo. We're also going to do an import photo. I didn't call it out explicitly, but so unit here is a reactive term or reactive object. This is basically what this is saying is, you know, like if you have like a void method call in .NET in general, you do it and it completes and nobody knows, right? In the reactive world, the nobody knows part becomes difficult because what we do a lot in the reactive, with reactive extensions is you might have a chain of different little units of work, but the next unit of work needs to know when the one before it completed. Or you also might need to, it is the inverse, you know, where you have a method that returns void. You might also have a method that takes no arguments or that you're not interested in the arguments with. And unit in the reactive terms just gives us this object that's sort of like it's like a notification object. You know, it doesn't really have a value. We don't ever new up a unit. If we ever use it, it's just unit.default, to be perfectly honest. But it's basically just like saying, hey, something completed. Here's the input of something. Maybe, you know, in this case, this is these two type parameters that we give it here. The first one is the data coming in. And the second one is the type of data coming out of the command. And we're telling it to use unit because we just don't care what's coming in. And then we're telling it unit because you really shouldn't care what's going out is kind of what we're saying there. We may adjust those, but that's usually my starting point for where that's set up. And then I had a question here on the previous screen where I wired up the title update, which is here. Is this creating an observable? It is, actually. So one-way bind is part of the binding engine that comes with ReactiveUI. So really what this is doing, we're not going to see it with this particular property, and maybe we'll get to one where we can see this, but what it's going to do is it's going to say, here is my notifying, or here's my object that is going to raise changes, that I'm interested in raising changes on. So it's saying this is this in this particular context is my page, and my page is going to have this object on it or this property on it called viewModel. The second parameter here is it's going to say on this page when this property raises this property changed, right? So for my viewModel object, when its title property changes, notify me, let me know, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pump that value into this third parameter here, which is title, right? So anytime this changes here, pump the value over to title. And this is really cool because this actually, this probably isn't a great example here with title, but if this were a more complex object, say that this was like an address object, for example, and it was like, I would say like address 1 or something like, you know, postal code. I can actually set up chained property notifications, you know, however deep that it needs to go. I don't know. That doesn't make sense. But you could set this thing down multiple steps, you know, or multiple iterations deep into the property here. And as long as all these properties raise changes, this will continue to work. Even if we replace the viewModel instance, or even if any of these properties get changed, it will continue to pump these changes back out to title, which is pretty cool. But this is, yeah, this is how we set up the bindings. And like I mentioned, this is how we set up an observable chain out there. Yeah, yeah, no need for like a week. So this is pretty cool. So, you know, this is a great point to bring up. So sometimes with .NET, you know, if I just write some pseudocode out here, sometimes with .NET, it's hard to know when to clean stuff up or to ensure that stuff gets cleaned up. So you'll have like, I've just got a button, whatever that is. You know, you don't ever write this. You don't let, you know, your friends don't let friends write this code. This code is bad in the .NET world because especially the mobile .NET world, I guess, because I have no way to unsubscribe from this the way that it's written right now in my code. I've got this anonymous method out here, this Lambda handling this, and I can't unsubscribe from this clicked event, right? So you don't know when to do it. You could write this out the full way, you know, where you would have like a handler down here, like a handler method to handle the clicked, and then I could, you know, minus equals it somewhere else, you know. There is, you know, and so sometimes what people will do is they'll build like weak event handlers or weak objects to manage that type of stuff, which is fine and cool, but like the weak object handling, I know, can sometimes be quite a bit can be a little bit confusing, and to know when your object's actually there and maybe did it get killed or whatever happened, you know, along the way can be a little bit difficult. So what I like about the reactive stuff is basically whenever we set up anything, we'll see when we do this out here in the command in just a moment. When you're done with it, you just like dispose of everything, and we control when it gets disposed, right? So we could potentially omit the disposal, like an explicit disposal here. And this is actually okay, because what'll happen here is, you know, if our workout capture object gets abandoned, you know, if nobody's referencing this workout capture object, the garbage collector will notice that and will actually be able to clean up all of our bindings. So that's neat because it will see that. It won't hold on to those. It will be able to clean them up just like you would, you know, with anything else. It doesn't have those strong or cyclical references like we might have with something like an event handler, like that plus equals event handler out there. But we also do have the ability to explicitly tell it when to clean up, which I think is neat. In particular in the mobile world, when we're dealing with, you know, limited memory devices, it makes it very easy for us to give scope. There actually is, and even in, I'm not using it here, but there is something that comes straight with ReactiveUI, which is called when activated. And when activated is going to give you a disposable. This is actually pretty neat. I'll stub this out here just so you guys can see this. So ReactiveUI comes with when activated, and what you would do with when activated out of the box is, I'm using my own controls disposable, but you would just assign it to this disposable that comes into here. And this comes right out of the box with ReactiveUI. This works on every platform that ReactiveUI supports. Gosh. Here we go. And basically when your page gets activated and deactivated, this is really cool. So when your page gets activated, so like in Forms, when it's being shown on the UI, it will go and set up all of your bindings right away for you here. Or it'll go and give you this place to go set up all your bindings for you here. And then when your page gets popped off the stack or something like that, it'll allow it to use this disposable that was passed in to automatically clean up those bindings. So it's really cool and neat because, like, you know, a lot of times you get unintended consequences if your app is getting, as the size of your app increases, where you might have a shared view model across multiple pages or some kind of shared object that's sending out notifications that's actually updating pages that are on the stack further down the line, or a page maybe that you thought got popped off the stack but maybe still had some references to it. This just sort of automatically cleans up all that stuff for you. So it's a really cool thing. My bind controls that I have here that I'm using does something similar. I keep on getting sidetracked here. I'm going to show this one thing really quick though. does something similar, but I don't like the default lifecycle in Forms is a little bit slow, I'm gonna say, for my taste. So there's actually a cool little property. See a cool property that I'll show here. Yeah, so integrations, like Dan points out, yeah, like integration with Prism and stuff like that. If you've got a place for when your page gets popped, yeah, just dispose of it, right? If that page is getting thrown into the wind, dispose of it and clean up all those resources and everything. It's like such a great marriage of those two things to do all that type of work, right? There is a hidden property inside of Xamarin.Forms, which you may or may not have seen before. I've talked about this before. I can't remember. I might have wrote a blog about it. I know that I've shown it off previously. There is a hidden property though, and it's kind of hard to find because the word renderer is like everywhere in Forms, but we'll just see if I could find it hiding. Yeah, as Dan points out, lots of cool hidden stuff in Forms. The amount of like time that I've spent just like combing through Forms code is tremendous. Like I've spent a lot of time just going through the code. It's like even there's so many things that I've done, I've found in Forms that is so smart that I ended up pulling out and using part of like for just like a native Xamarin project. You know, because like they have to do things and they have to make things work in a cross-platform manner. So they have to do all kinds of like cool, tricky stuff. That's helpful like all over the place, you know? I don't know if I'm going to find it here. Yeah, I say that and then I find it right here. Perfect. So each control, kind of funny. Each control, each platform for Xamarin.Forms has this hidden property in here called renderer. And I do a lot of piggybacking off of this thing. I was given the go-ahead to do that like a long time ago. I don't know if I really should be using it, but whatever. We use it in Aurora quite a bit, and we use it in our own custom code. What this is it's a property that like say if I was in my page and I did good Lord. On property changed. If I were to put like a breakpoint on here, we'll just run this again. I'll show this. You're going to notice this one property that gets fed through here called renderer that normally isn't exposed. But the renderer property is going to tell you when. So if you think of your UIs that you write in Xamarin.Forms, they're really just kind of like definitions of a UI. They don't know anything platform specific on them. See, did I put a breakpoint? More time. They don't know anything like really platform specific about them. So what happens is that content page that we're writing out here actually has to be glued up to a native platform. Let's see, it's navigation. And to do that, explicit style, background color, but content. Probably going to be a whole bunch of these. Title. Finding context. Parent. Oh, and then I skip over it. Are you kidding me? I got too excited. I swear, there was a property that just fed through here called renderer. And you could look for it yourself. But what the renderer is going to tell you is when that definition. So basically like what we're seeing here, the Forms page that we've built out here is really just like a definition of a page. And what's going to happen is that renderer property is going to be when our definition of our page has been glued to the native implementation of the page itself, or our view, or whatever our user interface component is. So it's really helpful for us as developers because what we can do, or what I do with it, I guess, is I use that to find out immediately when my UI is available on the native platform. And so that gives me the ability to start doing things like in Aurora. I know that I can start attaching stuff to the UI, or I can start attaching things because and doing things on a native basis because I've been glued to the UI. This renderer property will also fire when our user interface is being pulled off of the native component. So like if our page is being moved off of the UI and it's taking our definition here and ungluing it from the native platform. And so I use that then as well to do some cleanup of controls and components and stuff like that. You know, my feeling is that if my user interface is not currently glued to a UI, to a platform, there's really no reason that I should be listening for bindings or something like that. We've got a way for some edge cases where that happens, where we still want to do things, but that renderer property, did I write? I've got a blog that is like very, very poorly maintained. Let's see. Yeah, here you go. I wrote a whole thing about it last year. So you go to my website. It's ston.is. Here's the whole thing about it. If you want to pull that in. So I don't use that when activated. I just do my own property notification out here. But yeah, so let's come back here. Let's keep on doing this. I keep on getting sidetracked with everything. Let's go ahead and let's this rigged up here. So take photo, and this is going to be a reactive. Create. This is probably going to use some kind of like async thing. So we had a quick question out here. This is not Comet. That is correct. Yeah, we're just doing forms today. Just regular Xamarin.Forms with ReactiveUI and with some Aurora Controls as well. So not Comet. But we're going to be building out sort of a from scratch app here using ReactiveUI and some other cool stuff. So here, just going to create a command. I know that this is going to be something asynchronous, so I'm just going to stub this out here for now. This also creates, so reactive command itself is an observable. So I'm just going to set up some cleanup code out here on this side as well. All right, so I'm going to use that same dispose with type of setup here and have that do my bindings. My import photo. It's basically going to be the same. Stop debugging here. All right, so we're going to have two commands that run and get executed out here. Just for funsies. Do wait. Because I'll have to build out some interface to call out to the API to do the OCR process. Have this thing just delay out here for a moment. So these reactive commands are really cool. Because they automatically are going to do some work. So part of the command interface is there's like a way to tell it whether or not it's currently executing. Whether or not the command is currently executing, and I don't see a lot of people implement it. But reactive command implements whether or not the command is executing by default. Like it just automatically does it for us. And so what's neat about that is that when we glue this up to our UI, so I'll come back here. When I glue this up to my UI, I could do a few things with this, which is pretty cool. So I could do, check this out. So we'll do bind command. I'm going to tell it that this is going to be take photo. And then all I need to do is I need to point it at a control that implements the pattern for a control has to have the two properties on it. It has to have the command object on it. And what's the other one? The command parameter property on it as well. It's command and command parameter. So as long as the object that you're binding to has these two things, or these two properties, command and command parameter, in our user interface, we can use this bind command. And this is just a binding. that comes again with ReactiveUI, and it will automatically pass in values to us. Like we could have it, we could tell it, you'll notice out here, we could do some stuff. Let me see. We could do some stuff where we would give it like a particular parameter. You'll notice that with parameter, I could give it, I could default a parameter to be passed in here, or I could even give it another observable. So if we have something that dynamically changes, I could change the parameter that gets passed in. If we don't give it anything, it'll just, it'll send in a unit, I think, by default, which is good for us. And we'll set this up. We'll rig this one up here to... And actually, you know what I'll do too? So we could do this. So we're gonna change our loading. We'll get rid of that old loading. And we could say, so this is actually cool too. So we'll say if observable dot, we'll do a combined latest. We're gonna say this dot when any. So I'm gonna say this dot when any observable. So when I don't have a when any value out here right now. Anyway, when any observable, what this means from the ReactiveUI world is that whenever an observable emits a value, so like when an observable says like, hey, emits, I don't know if they said omits, emits a value, we're gonna listen for that and we're gonna pump it through. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna listen for our view models take photo, view model take photo is executing. So see, I've got on my reactive command, it actually has this is executing property that I could listen to. So I'm going to listen to see if this one is executing. I'm just going to start with false here. Actually, you know what? I'll optimize that. So I want to know if that is executing. I could probably do some of this work in my view model, but we'll just do it here for right now. You know, it would be smarter for us to do some of this in our view model. Just this is testable code that we could probably put somewhere else. So, good Lord. And we're gonna say so. Combined latest means give me the latest value from this observable. And this observable. So this actually won't fire off until we get a value from both of these. So actually, you know what? I do need to, I'm just going to prime this. I'm going to say start with false. So start with in the observable world just means like, here's your default or your starting value. So I'm going to tell both of these are going to start with false. Next I'm going to do is I need to combine these. So this last parameter that I'm going to give it here is the you'll notice that it takes in this case, 2 parameters. It's because I have 2 observables. And I'm going to say combine the latest value from both of these. And what I'm going to say is if any one of these is true. So if any one of those is true, and then I'm going to say... distinct until changed. So let me know only when there's a new value that comes across here. What I could do is I could say observe on my main thread scheduler. I'm going to tell it to go do something. I'm going to get this is loading here. Loading. And we're going to say come out to Lord. I don't know what it is, if it's I don't know if it's like OBS or something, but usually not so bad at typing, I swear. We could tell our loading to start and stop. I'll actually do stuff like we have our tell it to raise this up in our grid. So I'm going to put this at the top of our grid. Raise our child. There's not like a very granular way for us to do z-index manipulation with a grid. This is kind of the most that we get. This basically just moves this control to the top or the bottom of the z-index. Subscribe tells us that we want to listen for this thing happening. And then we're going to tell it when we're done with this thing, throw it all in the trash. So right, so what this is going to do now is it's going to say whenever one of these is loading, we're going to indicate to our user interface that our status is loading here. And then we're going to use that to control whether or not our loading indicator is showing. Let me do some work here. I think I need to do some safe, some stuff out here for setting this safe area. That's like something like set. Platform configuration. I can put it out here. Snag that bad boy. I don't need to call it like that. Cool. Let's give this another rip. What'd I do? Oh. Cool. I think we're good here. Probably have to do. And are we setting our view model up here? We are. Right, so now I've got my buttons rigged up, and when I click those buttons, because when I click these buttons, it's just gonna, if you remember, I just kind of rigged these up generically right now. It's just gonna do this like 1/4 of a second delay. What that'll do is it's actually gonna disable the buttons and show the loading indicator, which is pretty cool. So the disabling the buttons is gonna be managed fully from bind command. This bind command knows that when our command, it knows the state of our command, whether it's executing or not. Because it is executing and because this is bound up to this control, our user interfaces or our particular control here is going to become disabled while this is running, which is pretty neat. If you don't like VS for Mac, you just got to live in it for a while. You know what I'm saying? You spend enough time in it, and then you like crave it. So here, this should, there we go. It's pretty quick, but you can see it here. See how my button kind of disables while it's running there? Well, let's set this for longer. We see that we get that whole chain of things happening, right? So I got this out here. So now this is running. You'll notice that my button the whole time. So this is like such a huge issue on mobile apps. For anybody here who's like built a mobile app, you know that your users are like tap crazy. They're always going to be tapping on everything very fast. And they're always spazzing out about stuff. So this kind of like gets rid of that hammer. We call it like hammer fingers internally here. So somebody's got hammer fingers and they're always like mashing on things. Like our testers are really good about this. This helps prevent like those double taps, right? So it automatically disables the control for us. So we don't have to worry about like manually disabling it or anything like that. Our loading indicator, we don't have to write something else to like maintain We don't have to write a bunch of code that like checks the state of like our loading indicator and does a bunch of stuff with it. I mean, we kind of just let, you know, I mean, we still have to write code, don't get me wrong. But we just kind of let the state of our UI drive whether it's loading or not. This would probably be something like, for example, we could move this. Let's move this to our view model. Like this would be a smarter thing to have in our view model. And it's kind of neat because I could just sort of like lift this out of our, probably needed to pull in some stuff here. I could lift that straight out of our user interface, you know, and bring this straight over to our view model. And I can say bind to, and I've got this, and my view model has is loading. So I think I could bind that to this. And this should work as well. And we just need to update our UI now to listen for is loading. So I will do out here. I could say this dot value. And this is neat. I kind of mentioned this before, but the cool thing about the binding engine from ReactiveUI is that it's like object replacement tolerant. I don't know exactly what the right term would be for that offhand. But if we replace the instance of our view model object, this binding will continue to work. So if we replace this with a new instance of view model, it's going to look at that new view model's loading property to figure out what's going on there, which I think is it's really cool. It's a really neat feature for us to have set there. So I think this should work. Give that another shot. Cool. Still works. But we're able, like I said, we're able to really easily move that code from the UI layer to the view model layer, which again, I think is another great benefit of the sort of reactive UI model is that we do very consistent things, whether it's, you know, our UI layer or our view model layer. A lot of this code is written the same or in a very similar manner or fashion. So, you know, like it's very easy for us to move code back and forth. You know, it allows us to, I feel like, because, you know, it would allow you to shoot yourself in the foot pretty easily, but it also allows you to refactor stuff without it being like a huge nightmare. So, you know, like we did this in just a few moments, which is pretty cool. Let's see here. What do we want to do next? Got that. We've got this out here. I probably want to get my results for my workout. Out here. So let's take a look. We don't have any objects defined for that yet. So I'm going to go and find something that we had out here. Here, this is going to be our data. I think we'll be able to stub some of this out here. But this is we're going to do some models. And this is going to be our data that we're going to pull back in. Right? So we're wanting to capture our workout results and get those back in, and we'll show those on the UI. Let's make a new project. And this is pretty typical for the way I do this. Is I'm going to make a some .NET standard code to share my models. I think this is probably 2.0 by default. I pretty typically will make a separate project for my models just because my models are just going to contain like regular, you know, Poco, plain old CLR objects, right? Just regular old .NET objects in here. I'll create a separate project for these because there is a very high likelihood that I'm going to share this project between my API layer as well, or maybe some other project. And I don't want it to be too tightly coupled to this particular forms project out here. One thing that I do typically add is I do add so Fody property change to my models. Some people hate this. I like it. The cool thing about this is, so we're going to add property change to our models objects. It will incur like a slight performance impact, I suppose, but like it's really small. And I think it's worth it for the benefit. As what this is going to do for us is it's going to allow us to create objects or model objects that we can add and property change notifications to, and use these to glue up directly to our UI, right? So like without having to do weird mapping, like in the, when I first started doing this, I would do a lot of like auto mapper and stuff like that, because coming from the server world, it's sort of what we did all over the place to map our data at rest, like something that came from a database or some other data storage system, to map it into a model. We would do a lot of like auto mapper or something like that to map our objects. In the mobile world, we got to keep things light, right? So result item, I hate the name of this, but we're going to deal with it for now. Workout result item just gives us the by doing the Fody stuff, is it's automatically going to inject property change notifications, which means that we can just glue this straight up to our UI, which I think is pretty cool. To make this consistent, we're going to just create a model. I just create this object. It's just model base. And it's just a real cheesy kind of base object out here that we go snag this from another project just so I don't have to write some exclusion code out here. Here we are. Model base is going to be nothing besides just a class, and it's going to implement inode property changed. Cool. That's all that model base is. And then we're going to have all of our models just inherit from this. And again, at compile time, what that's going to do for us is that's going to allow it to replace our properties with ones that raise property change notification. We're going to have, we're going to call this like, it's going to be a string. Call it. I don't know, workout seems wrong, like exercise type. That's probably better. Exercise. Exercise? The exercise? This will be count. See how this ends up going. This might end up being bad. And then we're going to have to do something else that for right now I'm just going to do is string, and we'll call it like measurement unit. Because when we import these, you'll notice some of them are like yards, seconds, things like that, whatever it might be. And some of them are just like pure counts. But when this builds, let's see here. Like I've been mentioning, what this should do is if I were to go grab our bin, take this DLL, pop it into here. At compile time, so when it actually compiled my property, if you remember, like I just did, we'll look at it here. Here's my object it's saved. Here's my like regular object. It's just this model base thing. Properties are nice and clean. But at compile time, what happened if we disassemble this object? You'll see that this thing's raising change notifications, doing all kinds of cool change notification raising type stuff out here, and we don't have to deal with it. Our model code is pretty clean. It's not all crufted up and everything like that. So keep it nice and clean. So we'll have that. That's cool. That's probably good enough for now. We're gonna again. I probably have to, my wife's texting me, yelling at me to head out for something, but she's understanding. So we're just going to hang out for another minute, and I'm just going to wrap this thing up. See if we can get this list view set up here. So I also don't lose my place for where we have this thing going. So we want to show some imported results out here on our UI. So let's go ahead and, again, in the ReactiveUI world, we have this library that is not just for ReactiveUI. It's just a regular .NET library, but it is ReactiveUI friendly. Go snag this thing here. This is dynamic data. And dynamic data is your observable collection on super steroids. You know, it does, like, it slices, it dices. I don't remember how the rest of that phrase goes, but it does everything. You know, we could use it to connect it to like a list of items. We could filter the items down. We could use it to sort the items, and it will do all this stuff in a very efficient manner and allow us to update our UI in a fairly efficient manner as well. And so this is dynamic data, which is going to provide that functionality for us. And we do that with this thing here. So let me add a reference to this guy. Import those models. We're going to do this using this thing called a source list. And my source list is going to contain that workout item. And whoa. It's public. Cool. Call this result source list. Okay, and this will be private here. Set this one up. Okay, down in our register observables, then what we're going to do is we're going to set that results source list equal to a new source list here. There's another one as well called, so there's in dynamic data, the two primary objects that you work with is a source list, and then there's a source cache. They're very similar, except for source cache has this concept of your objects having like a unique identifier with it, so that it makes it more efficient to look at and find the particular item in a list to make modifications to it. At least right now with this workout result item, I don't really have like a unique identifier with it. I probably just slap a GUID on there or do something like that, but we'll just do source list for right now. Source list itself is disposable because it's going to be raising change notifications and doing all this other stuff. So we're just going to tell that to clean up when we clean up all of our other stuff so that it doesn't, you know, over aggressively do things later on. What else do we need to do with this? We're going to make it, so source list itself isn't meant to be bound directly to our user interface. So what we need to do is we need to give it a way to sort of expose it to the user interface, if you will. And we do that like this. We're going to say results source list. We're going to connect to that source list. So connecting to it's going to say, hey, whenever this list changes going forward, you know, if there's an addition, a modification, a deletion, whatever it is, we want to know what's going on with this list, right? So we're going to connect to our list. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say, it's going to say whenever this thing goes, let us know on the main thread scheduler, and then we're going to say bind. And I'm going to say out var, we'll say scribe. Cool. And this, it's going to look a little bit crazy here. So we're going to bind this to out var results. I feel like we need a better way to do this because this is more than a little bit confusing. But basically what it's going to say is that it's going to build this binding, and we're going to kick the binding into this new instance object that's a read-only observable collection. Now we can expose this on our UI. This read-only observable collection is what we want to expose onto our UI. So let me do this quick. I'll just set up a of workout result items, and we'll call this results here. This will be, I'm sorry, this will be private, and we'll just do this as reactive as well, so it can notify when its value gets assigned. And down here, then, what we're going to say is, I don't love the way that we write this. I feel like there could be something that could be like better to be chained in or something like that, but it's totally acceptable. So this is the object then that we're going to expose to our list view to tell it when something has been updated, right? So we'll connect this out here and do this. So what's neat about this then too, so I really didn't show it, but you know, we could do stuff out here. Like if I wanted to do, I don't know, be fun. Sort. Let's do sort, right? Blink. This will automatically sort these for us. So we'll say sort expression compare. Because it doesn't have a built-in, it doesn't have a built-in comparable interface. We're just going to use this comparer to build one by default, and we'll do it by exercise, since that's just the name, right? So we can just tell this thing to automatically sort for us and whenever we get items into it. We also need some way to go and retrieve our items. How about just at the end of take photo, we're just going to generate some items and toss them in. So again, I need to build out some interfaces and do some stuff for us to pull data in, but this is okay for now. So here, what we're going to do is, it's not going to happen today. As I say, we'll build out some interfaces, but what we're going to do is, I'll show you how to get data into here. So we're going to say something. What do I want to say here? We're going to say results source list. And so if you've ever worked with like the regular observable collection, you'll know that as you loop through and add items to it, it's going to raise change notifications to the UI every time it's adding items to it. So it's like, hey, I've updated, you know, if you're looping through doing a bunch of stuff, like the observable collection that comes with forms by default is just going to pump out a whole bunch of notifications. We don't want to do that, right? So what we'd rather do is, in the most efficient way possible, is build up a bunch of those changes and then notify only when we're done making those changes, right, if you will. So here, what we have with our source list is we have this edit method that we can call. Edit is going to take in an update action. So we're just going to tell it, you know, in this block of code, whatever happens in this block of code, don't send out change notifications until this is complete. Actually, this is mine. It's going to give us a list to work with. So here's your list. Here's your, you know, the current list that you have to work with. For us, we're just going to cheese it. And we're going to say inner, say this, we'll say clear out the list, get everything out of there. And then inner list.add, and we'll do a new workout result item. And we're just going to say, right, this isn't going to stay. So exercise equals one count equals RNG.next. Should be fun. Is that, did I actually have it? Cool. We'll just RNG those, and then we'll throw in like 100 items. And what this will do then is it'll clear out the list. We'll add 100 items in, but at the end of this edit block, it will just raise one change notification to our UI that our list has been updated. So instead of pushing through 101 changes because of the clear and then the other items that we add in, it's just a fairly efficient way to do that. It'll also do some other stuff here. So like if I explicitly wanted to do this, I could say, so say I want all of this like pre-work here, the sorting, maybe I had some filtering, some other stuff in there. I could tell this, sorry, we're going to do schedule. Subscribe on, excuse me. We do subscribe on, just this is our default scheduler here for this observable. We're going to say, do this work in the background. So again, this is really neat because it's going to say, here's your new list of items. In the background, go and sort it. You know, if we look here at like the other options that are available, transform it. Like if you want to convert it from object type A to object type B. Sometimes we'll have with like model objects, we need to wrap them with the view model to expose some additional properties or functionality. It just gives us that ability to do that. You know, filtering it, saying like, hey, we only want ones with certain criteria met to show in our list. And I could do all of that here by default on my task pool scheduler. So like on background, essentially on background threads. And then at the last moment, what I could do is I could tell this to observe on the main thread scheduler, and this will just pump out our values into our results object here. So it'll pump out those values onto my user interface thread, so I can guarantee that work gets done on the UI thread. So let's just create a real simple cell out here. So we'll add one new class. This is probably where we'll wrap it up here. We'll get this set up fast. We'll call this our workout. And this is going to be view cell base classes for everything. I need to tell it the object that's going to come in. So this is a workout. No, close. Let's have it pull that workout result item in. Cool. Because I like everything to look exactly the same, you'll notice like a pattern here where I've got my setup user interface followed by bind controls. Because I do it everywhere. Just make sure that me and my developers code stuff consistently, right? Again, we'll just do a grid. Main layout. It is, yeah, it's Dan. That's a great way to put it. So yeah, having this stuff separated here into different methods is like a code way of having separation of concerns, right? I don't, you know, a lot of times, like when we first started doing this, we'd have our constructor out here where we'd set up the user interface and bind controls, and it felt icky, right? So this just makes sure that I set up all my UI in one spot, do all my bindings in another spot. It also matches up pretty closely to how we do the view model work. So like we've got in our view model, we've just got a thing called register observables. Just make sure that we put all of our crap in one spot. We'll just set up our grid here, and this will be a real simple one. So our grid, and actually I'll show off, whatever. Like, I love everything about. I like Forms quite a bit. I really like ReactiveUI. You know, it's one of these things where, like, you know, you work with a tool for so long, you sometimes start to hate it. I used to do a lot of work for with another Microsoft product called BizTalk, if anybody here is familiar with that. At some point in time, BizTalk became like... Same. BizTalk became not fun to work with. Where's the vomit emoji, right? It was so... you know, it's like... It was such a cool technology for anybody. Like BizTalk, I actually don't even know. I used to like train on it. I was so involved in that. I actually just met somebody from Microsoft recently who used to write BizTalk Hot Rod, or I think he curated or published, I can't remember. And we had a good long talk about BizTalk and stuff like that. It's an awesome tool for doing like integration, enterprise integration stuff. And it was like massively ahead of its time, I would say. But also like just massively complex and very unwieldy and very hard to work with. It's an integration engine stuff. So like helping companies communicate via differing languages and protocols. Like we did a lot of stuff in healthcare, and people that had to communicate with EDI messages. Like if you ever worked in manufacturing or something like that, EDI is electronic data interchange, I think is right. Just to help companies send purchase orders and whatever else across the wire to each other in a standardized format. And BizTalk's cool, but boy, after you work for it for a while, you're just like, I never want to touch this anymore. Whereas Forms and ReactiveUI and all this stuff, it's changes all the time. You know, there's always new cool stuff coming up. Yeah. New cool stuff coming up and like everything like that. I don't know. I've never gotten bored of it. And I've always loved working out here. Come on, man. I need to get that new Mac with like a zillion cores on it. You could do it? Yeah, Dan, your Mac is cursed, dude. I don't know a nice way to say it. Dan, we were trying to get some stuff set up. I know Dan was gonna do he was trying to set up a stream with Rodney the other day and just trying to get OBS going with it, and we had him go through everything that him and Rodney and I had set up, and we were good on our side, but Dan's Mac was not loving life that day. I guess it still is not loving getting OBS in there. So if anybody here is an OBS specialist, if anybody knows what the hell they're doing in like a serious way with OBS, hit up Dan. Because I don't know what the hell I'm doing with it. You know, I hammered my way through getting this working on my machine, but I am in no way an expert. Here's a cool thing for it's like a cool performance tip for if you're using ReactiveUI with a view cell. So when you do your bindings for most stuff in a view cell, it's all read only, and with a typical binding, what we would do is you would set up a binding for each property. You'd set up a binding for each property that you're going to show in your cell, right? So you would say like, bind my exercise to this label, bind my count to this other label. And what that's going to do is that's going to have to do multiple binding passes, right, to get all that stuff set up. If you know that your cell is going to be read-only data, and it's really only going to change its data when the binding context, or in our case, the view model changes, what I find myself doing a lot of is this, when any value, barf. Why does Xamarin have to start with an X? So we're going to say whenever my view model property changes, this is just a quick extension method that I have that it's just a where. It's a link where statement that says, is this it's where not equal to null, basically, is what this is saying. But I just have it. We write this all the time, so I just have it written here as an extension method that I'm going to pull in. Serve OB-serv. Need to pull in system reactive link. All right, so I'm going to tell it to listen to these changes on here. I'm going to tell it to do. You could either do this in a do or a view or a subscribe. Both of these will work for you. Whatever pattern you like. More recently, I like this. I like having the subscribe be empty. I don't know why. Feel like it's a little bit cleaner. Yo. Man, I'm like OBS falling apart over here. Oh, no. Pulling that. So what I want to do, like I mentioned before, so going back to what I was kind of talking about here before I kind of got this stuff set up. So typically what you would do is you'd set up multiple individual bindings for my labels with exercise and count. But in this case, I can't really modify anything on these cells. I'd really just want to do all my work in as few of passes as possible. So what I'm going to do here is just listen for my view model to change. And then instead of using like what we used out on our workout capture here, where we had these one-way bindings that I had set up, in this case for the title, I'm just going to listen for my view model to come in. And when it comes in, I'll update the values. Text equals, VM dot exercise and count dot text. So this will allow me to do this and schedule these changes in essentially like one UI pass, as opposed to having to queue. If we think of how our UI loop is running, it's like refreshing 60 times a second. Instead of having to put multiple items onto the queue to be updated, I could do this in fewer passes, right? Or potentially fewer passes. Still might have to do it in 2 passes, but this is just a little bit of a cleaner way to do that, or a little bit of a more efficient way, I guess, to do this. And if I needed to, like I could even, like I'm 2-stringing here. This is kind of like again, something that we could probably do in a view model layer or some other layer. Since we own the model object, I probably could build a calculated property that's like count formatted in there and just have that do what I want it to do, or something along those lines. But again, we could come back and clean this up later. Like I said, the nice part is, though, I would just update everything in my cell right in this block here, which will kind of keep all that stuff fairly efficient, from that manner, over their perspective. All right, so we've got that. We need to update our item here. So it's going to be item template equals a new data template. And okay, and then I need to bind it to my list. So again, I'm going to use another one-way bind. And this is going to come from my view model again. I think it was results. And this is going to be bound to results.item. Okay, so we should be able to give this a whirl now. Did I added all this stuff in? I don't know. We'll see how this goes. Take a photo. Yuck. Did I lay these out into the same copy and paste? Yeah. Rerun that again. We got what we wanted mostly. Where like code hot reload would save my life, right? So we'll run this again here. We'll notice that we can then take our photo. And cool. We've got this. Yo, what's going on? This code's talking to me. Or the song's talking to me. That's funny. Skip that one. You can see that we've got all of our items loaded into here. So, we were able to get that that list view in. It's super efficient. Like if I take this photo again, like I said, it's really just going to raise one change notification for all the items in there. one change notification for all of the items that are being replaced in the list, because I can control that. I can control that here with my source list, right? So when I get these changes, clear out the list, replace the whole list of items with a new list of items, and then update them. Like I said, if we had like a unique identifier for these items, I guess we kind of have the exercise name that realistically is probably unique. You could even do something like, I suppose this will work. Let's do, we could have done we use a source list, but you could also do a source cache. And the only big difference here is source cache needs to take a string, because we're going to tell it the, property that raises, or the property that has our identifier for our item, which is going to be our so with the source cache, I tell it the I use another expression here to tell it which property is the unique identifier property for my objects. And then you'll notice I don't have, or do I have an edit? I do. What do I have? I have your list add. It's add or update. Here we go. And so what it will do then is it will look for items in that list and even more efficiently add or update the items in the list, right? So I should be able to do this, run this again. And now you'll see we get all of our items in here. And now if I update this again, it's going through the list, finding items with the matching identifier and just replacing those items in the list. So I shouldn't have, you'll notice I don't have any duplicated items out here. The items themselves in the list are just updating themselves. So it's just replacing the item in the list. And again, it's, there's a lot of items being updated here, but it's doing it in a very efficient manner. So, wonderful library to work with in terms of doing, dynamic data and updates and things. This is probably a good stopping point for me today, before I get pulled out with like one of those long canes, like in the Bugs Bunny cartoons or something like that. I think my family is out sledding right now, and I've been getting text updates that it is a wild sledding day out there for them. I will not be sledding. When I went sledding last year, ended up breaking my pinky finger, which was hilarious. A different story that needs to be told today, but I ended up breaking my pinky finger, and so my family's like, you could come out, Dad, but you're not sledding today. So I'm just in watch mode, I guess. I should probably head out. Let me take a look at the chat here and see if there's any questions or anything like that I might have missed. Awesome. Thanks, Homero, for stopping out, man. Yeah, switching between VS for Mac and Windows is difficult. I do it day in and day out. I probably spend 50-50 of my time between the two. So Asterix, like I totally hear you on that one. Like I said, it becomes that thing. I don't know. I love it. For all, it's not perfect. But I don't know. There's something about VS for Mac that I truly enjoy. I really do. It's going to sound like really silly. The font rendering on a Mac is so nice, especially if you have like a really high res screen. Is so nice. And I love working. And I just like the Mac in general. This is somebody who, if you were to talk to me before I did iOS development, I was the most anti-Mac person ever. So if someone that I knew like 15 years ago met me today and saw that I was writing iOS code and spent most of my day on a Mac, they would think I was very big into Linux, very big into. Stick with it or don't. You could do everything that you do in VS for Mac on Windows too, by the way. So like, some things are a little bit quicker, easier. I guess doing some of the iOS stuff, but nothing. Well, cool. Thanks again for everybody who joined me. Potentially do another stream next week. I don't know what's going on, but I probably plan on doing another one. Likely just pick up this app in whatever state it's in. You know, I might get a little bit of time this week to work on it, but you know, my schedule is going to be a little bit goofy. We might just pick up right where we left off here. On hammering through it. Hopefully you learned a little bit here. Hopefully it was helpful for some of the stuff that you saw get set up there. Probably be doing some more intensive UI stuff in terms of like layout and making it look pretty and things. Getting the basics set up. But again, hopefully worthwhile. If you have any questions, comments, thoughts, anything like that, you can get to me on Twitter at Michael Stonis. Tell all your friends, family members to like, follow, and subscribe. Or don't. I really don't care. If you find this enjoyable, if you think somebody else would find it useful, just. And if you missed it here, I post all this stuff out onto YouTube as well for like backups. Miss it here, I'll eventually get the link. Anyway, hope everybody has a good rest of their day, and I will see y'all soon. Get easy. Bye.